You were a void dweller, a deep space prospector. Your life was measured in lonely cycles. You drifted between asteroid belts and forgotten moons. Silence was your only true companion. Or so you thought. The music started softly. It was a whisper that tickled the edge of your hearing. You blamed it on engine hum at first, or perhaps a trick of your mind, the price of isolation. The sound was not in your ears. It was inside your head. A melody without notes, a rhythm without a beat. It felt ancient and impossibly vast. It coiled around your thoughts like starlight. You ran every diagnostic on your small ship. The comms were silent. The sensors were clear. The ship was sound, yet the music continued to play its silent song. You tried to ignore it. You focused on your work. You charted gravitational fields. You scanned for rare minerals. But the tune was persistent. It grew from a whisper to a clear, ethereal hum. It was a song woven from the light of distant galaxies. It resonated with something deep inside your soul, something you never knew was there. You were the only audience for this star-born orchestra, and you began to feel you were not alone. The feeling was a cold weight in the pit of your stomach, a prickling sensation on the back of your neck. You were being watched. You scanned the void around your ship again and again. Nothing. Just the endless black speckled with cold, distant fire. But the feeling would not leave. It was as certain as the hum of your life support. A fleet was there, hiding in the clever folds of space-time. Their hulls drank the light, making them invisible. They were silent. They were patient. They had watched you for weeks. They observed your confusion. They analyzed your ship's every move. You were a puzzle they needed to solve, a variable that did not belong in their equations. They called you the anomaly. To them, your strange connection to the cosmos was a disease, a potential plague that could unravel the predictable laws of the universe. Their order was built on cold logic, on the predictable decay of stars, on the silent march of gravity. You and the song in your head were chaos incarnate, a threat to their rigid peace. Their purpose was simple: to observe you, to understand you, and if necessary, to erase you. You knew none of this, of course. You only knew the song was growing stronger. It was no longer just a tune. It was a call, an invitation. It wanted something from you. It wanted you to respond. You felt an impulse you could not explain, a desire to answer the music, not with your voice, but with your very being. You looked out your viewport at the nearest star, a steady, white dwarf burning with quiet dignity. The song swelled within you. It guided your thoughts. It showed you a path. Without thinking, you reached out, not with your hands, but with your mind. You focused on the star. You poured all your attention, all your strange new awareness into that single point of light. You let the cosmic melody flow through you. You aimed it at the heart of that distant sun, and you pushed. The star pulsed. It flared for a moment, a brilliant, impossible beat. It was a drumbeat in the symphony of the void. It shone in perfect time with the music in your head. The light washed over your ship. It was warm and welcoming. For the first time, the song did not feel like an intrusion. It felt like a conversation. You had taken the first step. You had joined the dance. The fleet saw it. Their sensors screamed with impossible data. A star had just violated a dozen laws of star science. It had pulsed on command, on your command. The anomaly was no longer passive. It was active. The threat had escalated. The time for silent observation was over. The hunters of the Cathar Empire were dispatched. Their ships were knives in the dark. Their mission was to cut you out of the fabric of reality. You felt their approach as a sour note in the cosmic song, a sudden, sharp discord. The warm glow from your stellar partner vanished. It was replaced by a chilling sense of dread. Alarms blared inside your cockpit. Proximity alerts, weapons lock. You were no longer a lonely prospector. You were prey. Their ships were faster, stronger, more advanced. There was nowhere to run. You dove your small vessel toward a nearby nebula. A stellar nursery, a place of birth and chaos. It was your only chance. The glowing clouds of gas and dust were thick. They would blind their sensors. They might give you a moment to breathe. The Cathar hunters followed you into the vibrant maze. They were relentless. They knew these clouds were temporary cover. They believed your capture was inevitable. They feared the power you touched, but could not yet control. The nebula was a kaleidoscope of color. Pinks and purples and brilliant blues swirled around you. It was like flying through a dream. And within that dream, a new voice spoke. Not the song, but something else. Something ancient and impossibly wise. It was not in your head this time. It was everywhere. It was the nebula itself. It offered you sanctuary. It offered you knowledge. Be still, little dancer. The voice echoed, a sound made of resonating hydrogen and starlight. They cannot find you here. Not if you learn to listen. The voice was calm. It was powerful. It held the patience of eternity. You hid your ship inside a dense pocket of glowing gas. The Cathar ships swept past, their search beams cutting uselessly through the haze. You were safe. For now. The voice belonged to an elder. One. A being of pure consciousness. It had lived within this nebula for longer than your species had known fire. It had watched civilizations rise and fall. It had seen the birth and death of countless stars. It called the cosmic melody the great song. And it told you that you were a chanter, a mortal born with the gift of hearing it and shaping it. The elder? One began your lessons. It showed you the true nature of star science, how gravity and light were merely instruments. The universe was a grand orchestra, and you, the chanter, could be a conductor. You learned that the dance was more than just making stars pulse. Your connection to the great song could create. It could build worlds. It could ignite suns from cosmic dust. But it also taught you the other side. The power to create was also the power to destroy. A misplaced step in the dance could unravel a solar system. A sour note in your celestial song could silence a world forever. The power you held was immense. It was terrifying. You understood why the Cathar feared you. You were an untrained god, a child playing with the forces of creation. As you learned, the Cathar grew impatient. They could not find you within the nebula's vibrant clouds. Their hunters were frustrated. Their fleet master, a cold and logical being named Kalen, made a decision. If the anomaly would not show itself, they would force it out. They would send a message, a warning that you could not ignore. They chose a target far from your location, a small, unremarkable yellow star. It had a single barren planet in its orbit. It was insignificant on any star chart. But it was alive. It was a part of the great song. From your sanctuary, you felt the Cathar weapon charge. It was a dissonance that scraped against your soul. You watched through the eyes of the elder, one as they fired. A lance of pure darkness shot across the void. It struck the star. There was no explosion, no grand flash of light. The star simply went out. It was extinguished like a candle flame. And in its place, there was only silence, a hole in the cosmic symphony. You felt the silent scream of its death echo through your entire being. A wave of cosmic grief washed over you. 10 million years of light and life. Gone. In an instant. The Cathar's message was brutally clear. Surrender, or more stars would follow. The grief hardened into resolve. The fear became a cold, focused anger. You would not let them do this again. You would not let them silence the universe. The elder. One felt your shift in purpose. It guided your next lesson. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to learn how to defend yourself. You had to forge a shield. You learned to weave light. You pulled strands of energy from the nebula around you. You twisted them into a solid form. It was not a physical barrier. It was a shield of pure energy, a construct of the great song itself. It shimmered around your small ship, a rainbow of impossible colors. It was beautiful, and it was strong. The elder. One told you it was time. You had to leave the nursery. You flew your ship out of the glowing clouds. The Cathar hunters were waiting. They descended upon you instantly. Lasers and plasma bolts streaked toward your vessel. You held your breath. You focused on the song. You strengthened the starborn shield. The first volley of weapons struck, and they simply dissolved. They vanished into harmless particles of light. There was no impact, no damage, just a soft chiming sound as your shield sang. The hunters stopped firing. They were confused. Their most powerful weapons were useless. They had never encountered a defense like this. You had turned their own energy against them. You had harmonized with their attack. You had made it a part of your dance. You saw your chance, not to attack, but to understand. You reached out with your mind once more. You sought the source of their fear. You sought the mind of their leader, Fleet Master Kalen. You pushed past the minds of the hunter pilots. Their thoughts were a chaotic jumble of duty and confusion. You went deeper. You followed the chain of command. You found the cold, quiet consciousness of the Fleet Master. You touched his mind. You expected to find malice. You expected hatred or ambition or cruelty. But you found none of that. What you felt was a tidal wave of absolute cold terror. Kalen was not a conqueror. He was a protector. In the ancient history of the Cathar, a chanter like you had lost control. They had danced with abandon. They had unraveled their own star system. Billions had died in a cascade of supernovas. The tragedy was burned into the collective memory of his people. He was not trying to kill a monster. He was trying to prevent a history he had seen before. He was terrified of you. Not for what you were, but for what you might become. Your standoff with the Cathar fleet did not go unnoticed. News of the anomaly, the human who could command stars, spread like wildfire. Whispers traveled along hyperspace lanes and subspace channels. Races across the galaxy paused. They held their collective breath. The cautious veterans debated your nature in their crystalline halls. The warrior clans of the Gorgon sharpened their blades, unsure if you were a new weapon or a new god. Was this the dawn of a new age, or the beginning of the end? Some prayed for you. They saw you as a savior, a being who could reshape the universe for the better. Others feared you. They saw you as a destroyer, a random element that threatened all they had built. The galaxy watched your silent conflict. They waited to see if the human who danced with stars would bring them light, or an endless night. You had become the fulcrum upon which the fate of the galaxy now rested. The Cathar were losing patience. Your shield was impenetrable. Your passive resistance was maddening to their logical minds. Fleet Master Kalen saw his deepest fears being realized. You were growing stronger, more confident. He made a final, desperate calculation. The risk of you losing control was too great. The anomaly had to be eliminated, even if it meant breaking their most sacred laws. He ordered the deployment of their final solution, the Sun Death device. It was a weapon of last resort, a relic from their dark past. Its only purpose was to trigger a premature supernova in a target star. It could not be shielded. It could not be stopped. It was the ultimate expression of their fear. And they aimed it. Not at you, not at an empty star. They aimed it at a populated world, a garden planet in the Cygnus system, a world with 10 billion souls. The message was no longer a warning. It was an ultimatum. Surrender yourself, or this world dies. You felt the weapon's activation as a scream that tore through the great song. It was a violation of all that was natural. You saw the target in your mind. A beautiful blue and green world. A world of art and science and families. 10 billion lives, unaware of the sentence that had just been passed upon them. Kalen was giving you an impossible choice. Your freedom or their existence. He was forcing you to prove what kind of power you would be. You made your choice. You did not surrender. You did not flee. You began the grand and final dance. Your small ship turned. It moved away from the Cathar fleet. It flew directly toward the Sun Death device. You were a tiny figure against its immense, terrifying structure. The weapon was a lattice of dark metal and pulsing, malevolent energy. It was preparing to fire. The fate of a civilization rested on your next step. The Cathar watched, confused. What were you doing? Were you attacking it? Your shield could not withstand that power. Were you surrendering? Then why fly toward the weapon? Kalen felt a new kind of fear, the fear of the unknown. You were not following any logical path. You were doing something entirely new. You closed your eyes. You let the great song fill you completely. You were no longer just listening. You became the song itself. The Sun Death device fired. A beam of pure, concentrated anti-life shot toward the distant star. But you were there, in its path. You did not try to stop the weapon. You did not erect your shield. You embraced it. You opened yourself to its impossible energy. You met its wave of utter destruction with a symphony of pure creation. It was the most dangerous, most insane dance step imaginable. The energy of the weapon flowed into you. The Cathar expected you to be vaporized, obliterated in less than a heartbeat. But you were no longer just a human in a ship. You were a conduit for the great song. You caught the weapon's silent scream. You soothed its rage. You reshaped its purpose. You began to conduct it, to guide its impossible energy in a final, brilliant performance. The beam of death bent. It twisted. It wrapped around you in a cocoon of raw power. You took the hate, the fear, the cold logic of the Cathar, and you harmonized it. You wove it into the great song. The destructive energy became creative. The note of despair became a chord of hope. You were at the heart of a storm that could unmake a galaxy. And you were turning it into a work of art. The symphony of a supernova, played by your rules. The blast that should have been an ending became a birth. The energy of the Sun Death weapon, guided by your dance, did not destroy the star. It renewed it. The torrent of energy washed over the targeted sun. It erupted outward not as a destructive wave, but as a genesis wave. The raw materials of a new creation. The entire Cathar fleet watched in total, silent awe. Where there was once a weapons blast, a new sun was being born. A protostar, glowing with the promise of 1 billion years of light. The destructive power was not nullified. It was reborn. The 10 billion souls on the garden world saw a new star appear in their sky. a brilliant, benevolent light. They would never know how close they came to extinction. They only knew that a miracle had occurred. The Cathar ships floated in the silence. Their weapons were cold. Their mission was a failure. But it did not feel like a defeat. It felt like a revelation. Fleet Master Kalen stared at the new star. He finally understood. The power of a chanter was not a force of logic. It was a force of music, of art. You had not fought his fear with anger. You had answered it with beauty. You had shown him a better way. In that moment of creation, you felt yourself change. The energy had transformed you. You were no longer bound by flesh and bone. Your consciousness expanded. It merged with the great song. You shed your ship like an old coat. You became one with the light. You were no longer just human. You were a part of the cosmos itself. Your physical body was gone, but you were more alive than ever. Your song, your essence, now protected the star ways for eternity. You became a guardian, a silent, watchful melody that calmed rogue stars and guided lost travelers. The Cathar laid down their arms. They became students of the great song, learning not to fear it, but to listen. And across the galaxy, they gave you a new name. Not the anomaly, not the chanter. They called you the human who became a constellation. A timeless story told in starlight.